everyone. First and foremost, welcome at the webinar of 24Flow. At 24Flow, we focus on manufacturing companies where complexity is the norm and not the exception. And it are precisely these manufacturing companies that face many challenges day to day, hence why they need a flexible and resilient manufacturing execution system to serve their needs. And if we talk flexible, I think immediately about the challenges which are now listed. These are the challenges we observe daily within 24Flow. But the agenda is quite packed, so I suggest, Johannes, we dive right into it. We're very happy to have you here. We're very looking forward to your talk. And if all is okay, I will let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Stijn, for the introduction. Also, thank you for giving me the floor, the stage to present this. So the talk was already introduced, so maybe introduce indeed myself. So my name is Johannes Cottyn. I'm a professor connected to Ghent University, also very active in the Flanders Make Research Organization. And I made it a little bit my mission to look towards improvement methodologies, the best improvement methodologies towards a good manufacturing operations management, meaning making sure that you are having a shop floor which is as optimal as possible. And so that's the starting point. And if I look to the outline of the presentation, I want to focus on the last part, let's say, so the key characteristics of a future-proof MES foundation. But of course, I want to introduce a number of steps before I can really go to that. So the first step is looking at the reason of existence, let's say, of an MES system. What is it? And why is it there? It is connected to the digital divide we see between administration layer and a production layer. Then the next step is going over all possible solutions you have for this kind of, for covering that digital divide. So of course 24Flow is one of them, and I want to show the bigger picture. The next step is a very small part on standardization, because it can help us to go in the right direction, also to build that resilient MES foundation. Then a selection procedure, so the typical step for selection procedure, which is based on the lessons learned from a collective industry project we did in the past, where also 24Flow was quite active in. And then I come to the main part. So this is the outline of the presentation. But let's start with the beginning. I'm not sure what the background is of everybody listening and watching here. So what is the digital divide between administration and production? Well, if we look at a number of fundamental differences which are there between an office environment, let's say, administration environment, which is typically made digital or digitalized or made optimal based on an ERP software, enterprise resource planning software. And of course, that's a broad term, of course, to cover a lot of aspects that can be supported. And we look also to what is happening on a production floor. You see a lot of differences, and it's visualized here as that big divide between those two worlds. Also because they were the production was automated up until now. The digitalization of administration environment was also already happening, and then both need to come together. We see a lot of differences. I mentioned them there in the box. So there's a different time constant, of course. If you are on a shop floor in a production environment, we are talking about milliseconds to have data transferred or information communicated, and that's quite different in an administration environment. The amount of information is typically different, bits and bytes in production environment. Of course, also up to more nowadays, of course, but in an administration environment, that's a larger batches of information and so on. So we see a lot of difference, and that's the reason why we need some kind of a supporting tool, supporting methodologies in between. And in the past, that was named MOM, Manufacturing Operations management. So that's the start. Of course, I just need to mention that too. It is not all technology. So we're not looking at the optimal technology alone. So it's not the goal on itself to have technology in MES system, for example, but we want to achieve what we call manufacturing excellence. So it will be always a combination between the technology, but also the improvement programs, the best practices, and also the people. The people need to be able to, in the organization, work optimally with the systems. So that's something I will come back also later in this talk, but that's an important aspect. So if we then need to put one term from the past on a software system which is operating the manufacturing operations management divide, which was shown on the previous slide, then the term was positioned manufacturing execution system, an MES system, and it's a collection of tools or a software solution which is designed to support that manufacturing operations management and also to optimize efficiency, quality, transparency of a manufacturing process. Typical functionalities are scheduling, tracking and tracing, production reporting, digital work instructions, data collection. So a lot of things that fit in that, typically fit in that software solution. And if you would look to a lot of promotional activities of companies providing such systems, then typically it is advertised as a system which helps you to achieve operational excellence with, for example, improvement of overall equipment effectiveness, uptime of equipment, cost reduction, quality improvements, and so on. So that's a start to the topic. But what are the options? Of course, I have to say that 24Flow is an option, of course. If I'm in this webinar, Stijn, that is mandatory, of course. But of course, it's a broad landscape, and you have a lot of options to fill in the gap. And I just listed an example architecture or an implementation, let's say, on the right. So it's just with the typical terms where you see it hierarchically, of course, in this view, going from the top, which is administration, business management level, to the bottom, which is PCS as a production control system. And then you have the typical layers with manufacturing operations management or production management level, where you have MES as a term. If you look at that landscape, you have a lot of options. For example, you could go for for an MES application on the production management level, you could go for a standard software, or you could go for a customized software. So you, of course, if you want to have a solution which fits your typical workflow, your processes, your specific requirements of the company, you would rather typically go to a more customized solution. But that also costs typically a little bit more if it's in that case, or you could go for standard. We go deeper on that aspect, of course, later. You could go for one big monolithic application, or you could go for multiple smaller, which are integrated. A typical question companies have is also, do I need to extend my current ERP system, which is the blue here on the slide, or do I need to go for a dedicated MES system? If I go for multiple solutions, for example, a scheduler and then a performance analysis tool and so on, do I do it with the same vendor, or can I go multi-vendor? Does it need to be cloud-based or on-premise? Do I go for a solution which is very strong in a specific sector, very strong, for example, in the assembly electronics sector, for example, or in food and beverage sector, or do I start from a general application? So we see a lot of options, and actually it's not easy to say what the best choice is. It depends very strongly on your own situation. The only thing I know for sure is that somebody that is selling or promoting this kind of software always will say, this is the best set, because that's the set we offer. But it's always important to try to see through that, of course, and to see from your own company perspective what could be the best option. Okay, so I just go a little bit further on that one, showing the landscape, and I just showed the ends, let's say, of that spectrum, where you see on the right a visualization, a typical Gartner visualization, which has a lot of big players, of course, the all-encompassing solutions, let's say, where the Gartner representation shows two axes. One is completeness of vision, other one is ability to execute, let's say innovation, let's say on the x-axis, and then the capacity to execute projects, very roughly said, on the y-axis. And there you see a number of large players. On the other side, fully to the left, you could say it's rather smaller companies, but focusing on best of breed functionality. I'm not saying that 24Flow is there, to be clear, because that's one picture that fits the whole spectrum there on the left. So what I show there on the left in the picture is a collection of companies that were connected to a collective project we did, which was called MES for SME. So the name states it a little bit. How can we easily promote or integrate or adopt these kind of solutions for smaller and medium-sized companies? And I just highlighted, of course, 24Flow was a quite active partner in the project, also already connecting to a couple of players like Manual.2, because one of the main solutions to make MES fit also SME requirements is making sure that you have smaller blocks well integrated. So the technology providers need to also already think in advance on how could these solutions be connected together before a company is interested to adopt. But starting from best of breed functionality, building, connecting that together, you could also create an optimal MES, of course. And you also have somewhere in the middle, I called it medium, the MES light solutions, let's say, that maybe start from a best of breed functionality, let's say a scheduler, and then also build a little bit a larger application around it, but not an all-encompassing solution. So that's, let's say, the spectrum, which is connected to a lot of times also the size of the vendor, of the software vendor itself, but also the scope of the functionality which is in the solution. So a couple of names, but of course not all names. It's just to give you some kind of an impression on the software landscape. But the biggest problem that I hear and I see companies face is, how can I compare these different solutions? It's quite difficult. We need to make a choice sometimes a little bit blindly, maybe from the first impression also of the solution. So how can I manage to compare these different solutions from a functionality point of view, of course, at the first step? And then, we enter the standardization side, because if you want to compare something, you need to make sure that you're not comparing apples with pears, but that you are comparing something which is comparable. And then you need to try to map the different software systems to a standard framework, or you need to also map your own requirements, your own expectations to that framework. And if everything is mapped to the same framework, then you are getting in the neighborhood of a comparison, even though it is still a very difficult task to do. So if you look at the different standardization activities from up until now, from all the years that have already passed by, then we see two big organizations, let's say, two organizations where you see the logo on the middle layer, let's say, in between the ERP and the production layer. And that is on the left, the MES international organization. On the right is the ISA organization. I will explain in the next slide a little bit more in detail. But these are efforts from a full community, of course, both, where the goal is to try to standardize everything which is happening in between those two layers. So that's what you see already a little bit in the background. There is one of the models of the ISA 95, which is the standard of ISA, of course. And there you see also already a split up in 4 possible solutions, where MES is one of them, which is focusing on the production activities, but you can also have a focus on quality activities, which is then a laboratory information management system on the right, and also you could have a focus on the maintenance activities, and that's the one you see on the left, and then warehousing is the one you see here. Important is that these models, these efforts that have been spent to make something standard, is that you are able to do an exercise yourself already for documentation, for the requirement analysis, for example, but also could do an effort for integration activities, so that you can prepare yourself before you go into interaction with everybody. And the other way around, technology providers can also prepare for a possible integration with another software provider, or prepare for a discussion with a customer. And that's also the second step, of course, externally from you as a company. You also have something to base yourself on for the communication interaction also with different vendors. And you can also try to find out if a vendor is offering you an adequate solution for the problem you have, for the requirements you have positioned. So if you look to both organizations, very quickly, only one slide for each of the organizations, is starting with MESA, standing for Manufacturing Enterprise Solutions Association now, which is a collection, let's say, from the past, from the beginning of MES system, a collection of software vendors, technology providers of the software. At the very start, it was what you see on the model on the left bottom of the slide. You see here that it is positioning the different... Oh, I clicked wrongly, clearly, sorry. Yes. One further. Yes. So you see the different functionalities that are typically supported by these systems, certainly from the start. But the organization has already evolved to more focus on operational manufacturing excellence. So looking at what are the best ways to build such a system, to integrate such a system in order to improve your operations, to improve your manufacturing operations. So, and you see the last model they positioned was more on smart manufacturing, where also integration and also newer technologies, like of course AI and blockchain and so on, could be best used also in this setting. If we go to the next organization, is the organization, the International Society of Automation, which is of course a broader organization for everything which is related to the automation profession. And one of the standards is the ISA 95 standard, which is the standard where we're talking here about, which is the enterprise control system integration. So connecting administration level towards production, and of course the other way around. There are other standards too, like batch ISA 88, for example, and you also have wireless as 100, I think, 99 is security, and so on. So what is very important on that standard is that it tries to map activities, functionalities, structure, also those information which is related to exchange of data in that context, And it does it in, of course, a software agnostic way. So we are not using even terms like ERP, MES, but we're going to look at different levels, for example. So it gives you a blueprint, some kind of a universal language to talk about everything which is happening in that digital divide, and also how you could structure, how you could solve the problems to overcome that digital divide. So a lot of models and terminology. I could fill a full day on that, and maybe it can also help you to go asleep in the evening to look at those standards. So that's maybe not the most interesting thing to present, but you can, I will show you in the next slide. You can, of course, use those models in the background for example, an analysis, and also for, of course, integration efforts. And we come to that again later in the presentation, because that's standard modeling is one of the elements we see important for a good MES foundation. So that's standardization organizations. So here you see an example. So one of those models, it's a quite dense model, like you can see on the left, is showing what is called the functional enterprise control model, showing actually the connection point between level 4 and level 3 in the pyramid, computer integrated manufacturing pyramid, which is more or less the situation. Level 4 is ERP functionality. Level 3 is MES functionality. Of course, it's not 100% correct, but it's more or less that. And then you see the red line is showing the boundary, because if we're talking about integrating both monolithic software systems, let's say, then we need to think about when is a workflow or a communication crossing that boundary. And that's what you see here in an example from a company analysis, where you see if you have an order to delivery workflow, and then you follow the different numbers, then typically actions happen in different parts, different activities like production scheduling, order processing, product cost accounting, but also production control. You see a lot of steps happening, starting from the order being made by the customer, and then the delivery towards the customer. And then a lot of times we bridge we bridge the gap, of course, the digital divide that I showed you. Sometimes also we connect multiple other software systems together. And that's already giving a nice view in an analysis phase of what is happening now and what would be the ideal situation later. You can also position different software applications that might be a good addition on this very simple model. That's more focused on the higher level, let's say, so the connection level 4, level 3. You could also do the same thing, for example, for production execution, where we have another model here, for example, the production activity model, where you say from the moment that a production order is being made and it needs to be executed and followed up, what are all the steps that are happening. So here's also a very rough example showing all the communication actions, integration actions that happen. And here in this case, it was for an analysis to see which part could be extra supported by a new MES component. So that was the part in red. Just giving you some idea on how that standard can get useful for internal discussion and also discussion with software providers. So that's standard. So I explained very quickly what is an MES system. I explained you what the difficulty is, because we have a lot of possible options, a lot of vendors coming from a first implementation and broadening the scope. So no two MES software solutions are the same. So it's not that easy to choose. Then I showed you the standardization efforts that have happened to try to see a little bit clearer from a function and a data point of view on what is happening on that digital divide. So let's now see, what are the guidelines or what are the steps you need to go through to select a good and adequate MES solution for your company, for your problem, to solve your problem. So this is a little bit a summary of a lot of activities we did in that project that I mentioned before. It's already 5-6 years ago, I think, that we did that. But it's very rough, of course. You see the 5 steps towards a selection. And let's start with the starting point. Typically, also when a project is started at the company, there is some kind of a problem, and the idea of going towards a software support is triggered in some way, but it's not because of one specific trigger that you only need to solve the problem that triggered it. So, and that's the first point, of course. You need to go one step higher, of course, and then oversee the situation and say, okay, this was the trigger. For example, the trigger was, I want to go paperless because if I need to distribute all the papers and then I'm not that flexible to change, for example, the order, the sequence of the production order. So I lose a lot of time. So I want to go paperless, for example. Or traceability could be the trigger and say, I'm not able to find out what is being processed towards my final product. I cannot trace back. So I need to collect that information. Could also be the trigger. Could also be that you want to be able to have a better view on your productivity. It's more from a reporting point of view. And a lot of other things might be the trigger. Important is because it's a software solution which has a lot of different functionality. Important is to, if you have that trigger, to step back, take a step back and look, what are all the other things that might also be interesting for me from the business driver point of view. And maybe I don't have that trigger today, but maybe I will have it tomorrow or within 6 months or within 1 year and so on. So that's the first step. Try to make sure that you have the bigger picture. Then next step is, of course, have a look at the way you are working today. For example, you get the customer orders, you go towards a schedule, you go towards production orders, you go towards following up those orders in a production environment. What is the typical workflow, and is that the right workflow today? Because if you're starting automating something, that's also on the production floor for the production activity itself, also the case, but also for information flow, where we're talking about now, you need to make sure that you're automating, of course, the right procedures. And like the code you can see on the slide, if you automate the MES, you still have the MES, of course, but then it's automated. And so you spend a lot of money, and then it still is not an optimal way of working. So structure your activities, make sure you have ideal workflows and streamline your operations before you go towards actual software selection. So, and then we come, of course, in the area of the system selection itself, the software system itself. And then you see that we have 3 parts: study, document, and request. So study is looking at everything what is available. Document is trying to put it in a nice structure of what is it actually that you require. And then you can go to different vendors or internally compare different vendors and see what the best solution is to select. So why do I put those 3 together? Because that's a little bit, I see a lot of companies struggle with the same thing. That is, and go to the next slide then. You need to know what you want, of course. So if you know what you want, that's good. But you also need to, of course, know what is available, what is possible. And that's chicken egg story. I sense in a lot of companies that you don't know anything on the typical solutions that exist, and so then it's difficult also to position your requirements. So that's why on this slide you see a number of steps. So first you start with the triggers you had. You step back, you looked at the other triggers that might also happen in the future. Then you go to study what is available, and you have a lot of discussions. Go to fairs, for example. You see a lot of these software vendors, and then you can see what are the feature solutions that are available. And from that point on, if you there have a good view on everything that exists, then you can start documenting. Yeah, these are the things that are really important. I knew it already in advance. It is possible in that way, so I'm going to label it as a must-have. Then you also have things that you say, yeah, it's important that it will be there also in the solution later on, maybe not from the first implementation, but yeah, it will be necessary in the near future, and then we label that as should-haves. And then you also have things that are nice to have or could have. Typically something that is not that critical, but if it could be also delivered, that would be nice. So it is not going to determine the fact if you choose a solution, yes or no. But the must and should haves, they do. Must means if you have a requirement on a way of scheduling, for example, and it is not offered by the vendor, yeah, then you will not select that software. But what is very important, and you see it marked here on the timeline, yeah, it is important that up until that moment that you have a good idea on what are now exactly my real requirements, that you try to make sure that you don't lock in a vendor, and that you don't say, okay, let's go for that vendor, and then we're going to already look for a plan. No, to implement it. No, you need to try to make sure that you don't connect to a vendor yet, so that you have a good way to compare in the end. And actually, I think we might also later in the presentation say that point needs to be later, even in the future. You never want to have a vendor lock-in, of course, but here in this case, it is on the selection procedure. So that's the step. So if you then, yeah, maybe I'll go back to this slide. So the study phase I explained, so we need to know what exists. Then you're going to document it from a functional, technical point of view. Based on those standard models, you can structure it in a way that it's also easily interpretable by others. And typically, of course, software vendors are also familiar with the standard notation and content. And then you can structure it in a way that you can have meetings or even create a document that you can request information or request proposals from the different vendors. And based on that response, and also, of course, the cost associated with it, you can go towards a structured selection procedure. Okay. A couple of other things which are important. Yeah, one is, although you typically have a quite quick need, so you have a trigger, you want to improve it, you want to have it fast, try to take the time also to look towards a longer term vision, because that's actually the main theme of the webinar today. We want to have a good MES foundation, to have a resilient system which can last a long time in the future. So we need to make sure that if we already envision the should-haves in the future, that we also document it already. It can perfectly be, if you look at this view here, that you want to focus on for example, the scheduler support system in the first iteration, but you already have the idea that next iteration would be operator support system, but I'm going to cut it in pieces to make it manageable, for example. But you also need to make sure then that the integration points, the data collected, for example, and so on, is already in place or already foreseen for the future extensions, for example. So that's important, that you also take the bigger picture, the longer term vision into account. And that also is true if you look from the gain point of view, because a cost, you typically know more or less the cost, can still also deviate a little bit from what is mentioned at the beginning, but gains is not that easy to find for a software. Also here in this case, this is not ideal. So to have a good return on investment calculation from the start, it's a challenge anyway. But and that's the advice here. Try to look further than only the direct efficiency gains and cost reductions. You can make sure that people are spending less time on administration, data collection, data analysis, distributing papers from orders to the shop floor and all. That's something you can make very tangible because it's time somebody saves, and that's wages you save. You could also have, of course, somewhat longer term perspectives that if you have a system which is able to visualize how it's working, you can also improve. It's only if you know how everything is working and how everything is, how efficient everything is and qualitative everything is, that you can make plans to improve based on data and based on new insights. You can improve. So then you look to the let's say after 1 year, you see here on the graph on the right, you see it. So after 1 year, towards 3 years, let's say, you can have a lot of process improvements where you, for example, have better quality, have better efficiency, and so on, lead time reduction, and so on. So all these things you need to take into account. And it's always a combination, of course, of things you can measure. That's in the center of the slide mentioned as the hard gains here. So could be productivity increase. You can measure that, of course. Improved quality, but there are a lot of things that's not very easy to measure. Decision making, which is smarter and quicker, flexibility increase, what is part of the next slides in the webinar, and so on. So that's not that easy to measure, but you also need to take that into account as a reason to go towards implementing such a system. So that's the summary. So I notice a lot of times that if there is a trigger, if the action has been taken by a company to go towards a support system, then it has to be going fast. And taking the time for a structured approach towards selection sometimes is seen as lost time. And that's something I want to emphasize here, that it might seem to be lost time, but I think in a lot or not most of the cases, you will earn that lost time back quite quickly if you take the time to do a good analysis. So that means in the beginning, try to disconnect from the technology push. So don't focus on the things that can be done and the technology that exists, but think about what do I need? What are the business drivers? And try to avoid the vendor lock-in to a certain point, of course, and then make sure that you can compare everything and that you really select the most favorable solution, most adequate solution for your company. Okay, then that's the general procedure. Of course, we see now that it was already stated by Stijn in the beginning. A lot of reasons makes that it's not easy now to implement a software system and think that the software system will last for the next 20 years, even not the next 5 years. So that's not that easy. And you see that I was not able to calculate the value here. So I mentioned 3 + 3 + 1. It's not because of the new era where we are not able to calculate anymore. We rely on a lot of other technologies to do it for us. It is because I want to stress, of course, the reason of these characteristics. So I'm going to build that story. So starting with the first 2 trees in the caption there. But first, what changed? Well, I think I'm not going to highlight all the problems you might have. I think you know on the shop floor. I think what changed is that the flexibility that we need to have in a manufacturing environment and shop floor, we also expect it now or need to expect it from a software system. So that means that your software needs to be, and you have a lot of terms, I mentioned a number of this on the slide, it needs to be scalable. If your company is also scaling up, it needs to be flexible. If your company also needs to be flexible, and then modular, automated, connected, collaborative, smart. A lot of terms might already have popped up in that storyline. So that we see that typical traditional MES systems, also the bigger ones that are very I did it very well in the past, are also under pressure right now because we need to have some what we call now Industry 4.0 ready system, a new MES system. I try to look, and also, of course, it needs to be cost efficient. So, but I think that's clear. So that that it's just a matter of putting numbers there, but we want to have something which is cheaper, of course, and also doesn't have a lot of hidden cost, lifecycle cost, let's say, for your software solution. So I tried to put it also in a number of characteristics, which is the first three, the two numbers, is the first three are the must-have. So I see that as the characteristics that you most certainly need to put in your application if you're building an application or selecting an application today. Should-haves, I think they are also quite essential, but you could wait a little bit and say that's the next iteration. But sooner or later, you also have these requirements. And so let's build them gradually. So the first one, even if you only have two applications, which might be an ERP system and an MES system, for example, that need to be connected, make sure that it's decoupled integration first, meaning you first think about the integration. You first think about how are these solutions going to be connected together before you select even the software systems. Meaning that if you do that integration, and later on you need to change one of the software solutions, then it is not that difficult. Of course, if you have a lot of software solutions connected and they're all point-to-point connections, but because they were gradually integrated, then you get some kind of a spaghetti architecture you really do not want, because that's not maintainable on the longer run. So that's the first point. Integration is a very important aspect. So make sure everything is decoupled, but that you have something in place. I give an example in the next slide. Something in place that focuses on that integration aspect. Second part is make sure that you do not just collect data. So that's also something a lot of companies say that we have a lot of data, but we don't use it. So we know today a lot of projects are happening on AI, for example, and we see that a lot of times the data is not in the format that we needed, or the context is not available in which the data was collected or needs to be interpreted. So provide the context. So that also is something that is very essential, a must-have for a solid MES foundation. And then the third element, and that's something I think Stijn is also going to focus a little bit on later, then is make sure that it's configuration driven and not hard coded. We all know that custom code is something we think we need sometimes because we want to have a solution which is really tailored to our requirements. But of course, custom code ages very badly. It's one of the biggest problems to maintain a software system. So we need to find ways to do it differently. Have the same result, of course, but the fact that it's custom or the thing we want, but that it's not hard code. So these are the three must-have characteristics of your future-proof MES foundation. Then should-haves are building a little bit further. So modular and composable structure means we need to be able to have an incremental evolution of functional modules, starting from scheduling, going to reporting, and so on, that we also can have the same, what I mentioned in decoupled integration first, but then on a more functional level, modular level. So we want to make sure that at any given time, if you just take one block out, for example, a scheduler, and want to replace it with another scheduler, that is not a lot of work. That it's a very easy incremental evolution of these functional modules. If we collect the data, we also want that data to trigger, so based on events, trigger logic. So that production events really trigger the logic, that it's a logical start of a workflow if the data is collected. So we called it here event-driven, real-time capable, so that your system is really acting upon things that are really happening on your factory floor. So that's also next step, starting from that data collection, context-aware data collection. And then the third point is deployment flexible. So a little bit related to the cloud questions a lot of times. So it's not that it needs to be cloud only, of course, but make sure that it's at least cloud capable. So, and that, yeah, for also different environments, it might be that the solution needs to be able to run in the cloud and another place on premise and so on. So we need to make sure that we are flexible from the deployment point of view of the software. So these are the first 6 characteristics. I have a quick example just because it's also connected to a project we're initiating. So if you see on the right here, a typical structure where you start from different sources of information, you integrate them, you store the data, and then you have some on the top, some functional modules towards analytic traceability and interaction. Then if I go to the first one, so the decoupled integration first architecture, then one of the methodologies of technologies is unified namespace. Maybe you have already heard of that one. That's an implementation which has some kind of a broker, message broker based on MQTT, which connects all the software components, let's say, like you can see here, and they can all post or publish information in that broker, and also can subscribe on these topics to get information, and they can do both. So, and there you have then a quite flexible way of integrating different components. So if you replace one of the components, then it's not really a big issue if they follow the same structure. It's also a little bit the connection also of the second must-have, because we also already position that information in the right categories. For example, you could use a hierarchy of ISA 95, like you can see here on the slide, company site area, so that it's already in the specific context that the information is available. Here in this case, it's a temperature value. A second example in the same structure here is then if you store an information and we collect the data with context, so that was the second must-have. Then one of the technologies is here the manufacturing knowledge store, which is based on a knowledge graph, meaning that it's linked data, that we have a lot of data where also context is linked inside the data, is built on some kind of a structure, some kind of an ontology, like you can see here on the right. And also you can query that, of course. So I'm not going in detail. You see my time is already running out a little bit. So, but it's making sure that all data is readily available, connected, and you can interpret it. And you can also deploy intelligent algorithms, of course, on top of that data. So just to show, yes. It's a project we're initiating. It's a Vlaio project, a Cook Plus project, actually, where we try to link both together, and we see that as a good starting point for an MES foundation. It's just with example technologies, of course. There are alternatives, to be clear, but certainly for smaller and mid-sized companies, it could be a good starting point. So if you're interested, you can certainly contact me. Another thing, as a last example, is then going on the should-haves number 2, which was event-driven, real-time capable. You want to, of course, create operational actions, but you can perfectly also go towards optimization, improvement actions, which are followed up based on events that happen on the factory floor. You can have what-if scenario evaluations. What if I would allow a rush order? What if somebody is sick? What is the best reorganization that I can do? So you can also use digital twin technologies, of course, to look at the impact of certain choices you will make, and then try to decide what is the best option. Okay. Good. And then I think I cannot see you, of course, but maybe some people are thinking, yeah, but there was still a 1. There's still a 1 at the end that goes towards the 7. So how does that add up on this structure? So, well, one very important thing, and I started also a little bit the discussion today, is that you need to be sure that it's not only a technological approach, and that it needs to be, your MES needs to be organizational ready. Means, yeah, you have some kind of a governance structure, of course. You need to have, it needs to fit your organizational model, and it needs to be, of course, also human-centered, because people need to work with it. So if you want the solution to be used as you technically thought it could be used, then you need to make sure that that link is also taken nicely into account. So, and that makes 7. So then we have 7 characteristics. So maybe to summarize, my key takeaways is, don't put all your eggs in the ERP basket. So that's something I strongly believe. I'm not saying ERP is bad, but it is good in a lot of things, but most probably not managing your shop or organizing your shop floor. So that's, I think, something which is a better fit with what we have discussed today. Forward structured approach to MES selection. Like I said in the presentation, it takes some time, and I see a lot of companies not wanting to do it because they want to quickly go further, but then in the end, they have some surprises. So typically, it is worth to take some lost time, let's say, at the start. You catch up certainly later, and then go for a future-proof MES foundation. Take into account a lot of technical guidelines which were listed, but also the organizational human-centered ones are, of course, very important. And then that is the end of my part, at least. So if there are questions, I think you can certainly ask them in the chat. And then at the end, we still have some time to go over those questions. Okay, Stijn, back to you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. You just gave our commercial team some more work, but other than that, great insights. And as a proud Flawless Make member, I can only recommend these cook workshops. So the video will be shared afterwards with everybody in the room. So if there are questions, definitely reach out. Now, as I said, we will also see it from our pragmatic side. So Johannes described it perfectly. On the left, we have the ERP. It's excellent at defining a high-level plan, order entry, master data. But then on the right, we have the production reality, especially in high mix, low volume. We have day-to-day exceptions. We need traceability. We need to guide the operator in a unique order. So let's say we quite seal off the messy middle. So short recap. From our perspective, resilience isn't a feature list. It's indeed an architectural choice and outcome of a well-thought track. So from our platform perspective, and we do keep in mind the advice from Gartner, they have a market guide for MES solutions. Needless to say, go cloud with, of course, a hybrid option, whether it's from a scalability, a security perspective. Also, let's not forget about the non-breaking updates. Other than that, low code. I will elaborate later on that if we go into the personal perspective, because low code enables your people, enables your process engineers. And last but not least, modular and open. I have one nice one-liner. It's think big, act small, but scale fast. So make sure you have an end-to-end vision, which lasts for years. So you don't pick a simple web app, which doesn't meet your future needs. Don't go for the ERP monolith, and definitely keep open in mind. An open architecture, open APIs, and open data export don't get locked in. And that's exactly from our 24Flow perspective why we selected Salesforce under the hood of 24Flow. You don't need to know the platform, but do know that you get enterprise services for every manufacturing company. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel by building yet another insecure platform. We're surfing on the shoulders of a giant being Salesforce. But technology is one thing. In the end, and that's not my number 7, but my number 2, it's all about the people. It are your people that keep production running. And technology, being low code, helps them to keep the process up to date. And within make to order, they have to deal with a lot of variability. So let's make sure we provide them with software that helps them reduce the cognitive load. and ideally enable your process owners. For the IT people in the room, define the governance, but enable your people so you're no longer a bottleneck, but an enabler within the organization. And just to give you one very small example, here you see the 911 flow. And on the right screen, it's very easy. If the planned end date of a production order turns out to be greater or equal than the delivery date, well, then the process manager flags the order as 911, meaning we're running behind the facts. And that's what you want your people to do, and you don't want to do that being IT. Enable your people, it are them who run the shop floor. Last, the process. If you can't describe the process, don't even think about implementing an MES solution. And that's why upfront, what problem do you want to solve? What is the current state within your production? And exactly Moscow, we also applied, what do you want in or out scope, the first phase, the second phase. But the last one, I find personally the most important one. Define your success criteria upfront. When can we talk about the success? And from our perspective, yet again, here you see a nice example of our project charters. We sit together with the customer, looking at the critical analysis on how they work today. That we translate in small improvement solutions, all on the same platform, but we can deliver value app by app. And in the end, it's all about the benefits. So feel free to use the structure, but at least know when it will be a success upfront. And last but not least, it's to keep the commercial people awake also on our end. This is a nice questionnaire, which you also could keep in mind for the future. So it's not only about the project implementation, but many times simply ask, what if I want to onboard a new cell, a new team? How is it if an upgrade appears? Will it break my system? Will it have downtime? Or even, we're being ambitious, we need to scale across sites and across countries. What does that mean for my current MES implementation? All interesting questions, which gives you a future-proof view on the total cost of ownership. Last but not least, since we're running out of time, what's in it for you? We started with a messy middle. Now let's embrace that ERP. Let's make sure that we can deal with the challenges that the ERP has. And that's why an MES solution, for instance, like 24Flow, is a perfect match. Bring the ownership to the shop floor. Support your operators in every step of their unique order. And the result will be that your planners can deal and plan with more accurate data. And in the end, if we plan more accurate, we assemble, for example, more accurate, we're really in that continuous improvement loop. And that's what it's all about within production. Now, I don't want to elaborate on one specific customer case. And especially our marketing team has been working behind the scene on the updated website. So I invite you all to simply look at all our customer cases that are online and be inspired on what an MES can mean to your company, to your production. Sadly enough, I think we ran out of time for questions. We like to respect your time schedule, but if there would be questions, as I said, the video will be shared with everybody in the room. Also from our end, do not hesitate to contact. There are no stupid questions. And if needed, we can come back on that later. So for now, I can only thank you for your time. I hope it was interesting. And of course, in the next quarter, there will begin yet an informative webinar. Thank you, everyone. Let's keep production within Europe. Let's make it happen. So good luck with your MES implementation, and we're on standby if needed.